I saw this thing go over, what they call the thing, you know. And it was exactly like a railway carriage, you know, lit up. And it started up overhead there, and I saw it and watched it right out of sight, right over the hills.
But I looked in that direction, there was a silver plane and a pink one, like between a pink and a red cerise colour then. Right side by side. And they were in that direction, and there was no cloud, but I don't know where it went to.
I heard this noise, a hell of a noise it was. And came down, you know, it was a bit misty, foggy. And well, it was like as if a tin can was floating nuts and bolts, you know, and somebody was rattling it.
What I did see was a green shimmering light for about a quarter of an hour.
Well, it's hard to explain. It's like a bright light with a red light in the middle.
Like cigar shape, glowing at each end.
I saw something over there between those two bungalows, and to me, it looked as if it was about 500 feet high. No higher. It seemed to be hovering.
It resembles something like a comet, but comets are white, so this one was orange, oval colour, so it certainly wasn't a comet.
You're listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and now it's time for the Paranormal Peep Show.
Good evening, good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. This is the Paranormal Peep Show, and my name is Ben Emlyn-Jones, and I have some very interesting guests for you this evening. It is Sharon Mason and Stuart Dyke. Hello, guys. How are you?
Hi. Hello. Yes, and thanks.
And I've also, of course, got to introduce my co-host, Andy Chaplin. Hello, Andy.
Hello, Ben. It's always technical issues joining the new Zoom meeting, but here we are. I managed it, and let's roll with it.
Yep, that's the norm these days, yes. And of course, who can forget Mr. Paranormal Peep Show himself, the one and only Neil Ward. Hi, Neil.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Hi, Sharon and Stuart, and hi, Andy, and hi, Ben. Thank you very much indeed for everyone coming on board this wonderful Zoom call. We're going to hope and see if it actually glues together at the end of it, see if it does work. So just to give people some background here that are listening and watching, we met Stuart and Sharon at the Warminster Thing 60th anniversary conference, which was taking place in the town of Warminster in Wiltshire. I've got to get my counties right. I nearly said Shropshire. I don't know why, but there we go. Wiltshire. And that was a kind of a focal point in the mid-1960s, around December 1964, for lots of weird things beginning. Potentially UFOs and strange, weird sound effects going on, and sightings and strange encounters and things. And they have been celebrating it I presume every 10 years or so. I don't know when the actual first conference was, but Ben, you went to the 2015 conference, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Warminster 50. Yeah, it's the 50th anniversary of the Warminster Thing. I have made a video about it, so I record the event just like I did for Warminster 60. And yeah, I mean, there is no annual event as such in Warminster, but there is, like I said, I know that at least this particular decade and the one before was celebrated, and also know that that the actual start of the thing, sometimes it's timed to Christmas 1964. That's when most people say it is. But the big turning point was in August the following year, when there was a big town hall meeting, and it was so well attended that people couldn't get in. I mean, the town hall is actually quite a small building, I must say. It's this very, very small, rather square-shaped building in the middle of Warminster. But some local people spoke, including the mayor, chief of police, the local vicar, people like that had a panel, and everyone was very, very interested in what was happening. Some of it was filmed, actually, which you can see on YouTube. It's pretty clear that everyone in the town had an enormous number of strange experiences, and attempts to explain it away, as, for example, flares and ordnance detonating from the local military defence training estate, where land forces regularly undergo military training. Doesn't make sense. I'll say that from the outset, because those people are used to those phenomena, because that estate's been there for over 100 years. So it doesn't make sense that.
Was it a broad range of paranormal activities? Did it cross over into spirit and ghosts, or was it mainly UFO oriented, or what was the scope of it?
Well, from what I've seen, it's very similar actually to events such as the Skinwalker Ranch or the Mothman sightings of West Virginia, USA. But yes, Sharon and Stuart will say more about that.
Stuart. So Stuart is the organizer, and you have a background, Stuart, in crop circle research and crop circle phenomena. So was this the first time you've ever organized a conference of this kind of size?
This kind of size, Neil, yes. I mean, I've organised smaller events at the Coronation Hall, down at Autumn Barns, but not an event of this size. So it was a bit of a departure, but a good one, and a very rewarding one as well, because of the journey that we had with the alien mural, and that took quite a few weeks to sort that out, because that had a potential problems of using it on the original wall, because it's earmarked for demolition. And then we did a whole round circle come a few weeks and thought, well, let's just put it on the same wall, and let's run with it and see how the publicity goes, to see if it will eventually be demolished and it might be able to be repainted somewhere else in the town. So we really wanted the mural first before the conference, because it was part of the 60th anniversary, and it would have been great publicity also for the conference. So, I had my own personal agenda involved in it, but I was pushing it along with Paul Boswell, the artist who did the original wall. And yeah, we had a really great time, and it was a great energy. Some businesses around the town weren't quite on board, but you basically find that some people are under the consortium of other people who don't actually live in Warminster. They're somewhere in another county, so they don't have the connection to the town, and so their decisions are kind of a little bit isolated in some ways. So that was interesting, but I think we made the right decision to put it on the original wall, and let's hope that it stays there for another 10 years or so. If it doesn't, then we'll sort something out for another location. So that took quite a few weeks out of my schedule as I'm leading up to the conference. So, but I was okay with it. I ran with it. We got it done as quickly as we possibly could. And yeah, it was a really interesting time. And
what prompted you to start the conference then? I mean, obviously you realised this conference, the anniversary was coming up, wasn't it?
Yeah. So come the end of 24, I thought, well, people had done the 50th, and I thought, well, let's see if anyone's actually doing the 60th. So I asked around, and I found Steve Wills, who was involved in the 50th anniversary, and I thought, well, okay, let's run with this. Steve knows his stuff. He's a local authority on Warminster Thing, and of course he knew a lot of other people, and it kind of snowballed from there. And I thought, well, if Steve doesn't want to come on board and actually help with the organising, I'll just do it myself. So that's practically what I did, with the help of Sharon over the months as well. But it was pretty much a full-time situation at times, trying to get it organised. And yes, it was a great success.
And how much? Oh, go on, Ben. Go on.
I was going to say, there was a wonderful mural that was there previously, which was made a big centerpiece of the 50th anniversary. And it was as good as it was. I think it was right actually to replace it with a new one, considering the 60s. The 60s a big like moment.
Yes, I mean, even Paul said, he said, look, I've moved on 10 years, and, I've become, a little bit more dynamic in my art, and he could see that it was a little bit dated. It was very worn over the 10 years. And so he was absolutely on board 100% that, he wanted to do it again, and even put it on the original wall, because he said, as a street artist, it's very transient, what happens with your art. Sometimes it can stay there for years, and then sometimes it can only be there for literally a few weeks. So he is kind of like the local Banksy, I suppose you could say, in a way. And and he quite likes that role, and he said, well, look, if it's only there for a few months, so be it. We'll do it all again somewhere else. And I thought, that's the kind of attitude you want. That's the energy you want. And it was great. He's a terrific guy, and and we got on really well. Right from, it's almost like we knew each other for years. So that was quite odd in itself. It was kind of just suddenly clicked immediately, and just went from there.
Because my impression was that I spoke to him, but I don't remember seeing any images of the previous mural that he'd been involved in. So when I understood it was repainted, I thought, so was it like just a touch up of the original work? But by what you're saying, it was a completely fresh design and everything.
Fresh design, new colors, new design. And what I said to him, let's incorporate the conference center artwork, which is part of the website, into the design. So that's the bit with the street, the high street, where you said the UFO hanging over. So that's that part. And Paul went, yeah, that's brilliant. So we incorporated that. And then as on the day, it was literally on the day, Paul had obviously an art already sorted out for it, but then a lot of stuff was very off the cuff. Because he suddenly realized, well, I'm now going to put in the barn and Cradle Hill, and then let's put an alien hanging, around the corner with his hand hanging on the tree, and and it just went from there. And I was just watching all this developing on this wall, and it was fantastic, and yeah, I mean, he's got a huge amount of work from this as well. So
that's brilliant. Wow. Wow.
I love the feature of Arthur's face, and like there's a little bit of text that explains a bit of background.
That's right.
So that will help.
He actually wanted to put War and Peace on there about Arthur's life, and I said, Paul, you'll be there forever doing that, mate. And I didn't think we got enough war. So he had to water it down quite considerably. But I think he put the salient points about Arthur on there, and that's all it needed, really.
It's in the right place too, because I hope they do keep the wall, because it's by the big main central car park, which is where most people arrive. It's where I've been to Warminster 3 times, and I turned up at that car park all 3 times when I arrived. I think most people do.
Yeah.
And like many small towns, it doesn't have a very good bus service, so people usually drive. So the first thing they see when they arrive is this little piece of local extraterrestrial history.
Well, it was actually, it was, we wanted it to, because we knew the fact that the wall was earmarked for demolition. We wanted it to possibly put it on the Horseshoe Walk wall, which is the entrance coming off the central car park. So because it's got a great big staircase, and Paul wanted to add the staircase into the design and everything, and so we worked out a design for that wall, but sadly the owners didn't want it. They thought an Amazon locker is going to look better on the wall than an alien mural. Anyway, that was their decision. So we thought, okay, let's, because the thing is, you probably find that once you're so close to a project, sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees. Sometimes when you're really close to something, and it took somebody else to say, but just put it back on the original wall and let's see what happens. I thought, yes, because we were really at a roadblock with it, what we were up against. And so that was a massive relief, actually.
There's also a danger that if you had found another wall somewhere else, that people would just see the original wall and not even discover the second wall. So,
absolutely.
It kind of works both ways, doesn't it?
I think Warminster does have a very few walls that you can actually put a mural on, because I walked the entire, I think I know Warminster the back of my hand now, because I walked around every single wall around Warminster thinking, okay, if we put it here, are people going to be able to see it? And, lots of people gave lots of advice about where to put a wall, but then when you go and see it, you think, no, it's not really appropriate, not for what you want it to be. If it's commemorating 60 years of a mystery, it's got to be seen, so yeah, if it does go, we might be up against it a little bit, but I think, maybe speaking to the council, they might perhaps want to put up a hoarding in the local park, and then it becomes a permanent fixture in the local park. So, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, if we come to it.
Well, that's it. Like at Rendlesham Forest, they got this large, Ben, you've seen it. I think the model of the alleged craft that landed at Rendlesham Forest is being placed there, presumably with permission of Rendlesham Forest Council, whoever runs that sort of thing.
Oh, yeah, it's the Forestry Commission, and they actually commissioned the artist to do it. Now, unfortunately, the object's in the wrong place. Where the object actually landed is actually a private property. It's a farmer's field. But it's about as close as you can get, probably.
Right, okay.
Within the space of there's a
I think
glade.
that's the problem as well in Warminster is the fact that the town don't recognise the fact that this was a massive thing 60 years ago. I mean, Warminster was put on the map, on a worldwide scale. I mean, people from America know about it, in the middle of Tennessee. Oh yeah, I know about the Warminster thing, and it's like, wow, and so it does need something more than just a mural, I think, because it does need a plaque on Cradle Hill to say that this is where Arthur Shuttlewood did most of his night watches, and they saw incredible things up on the hill. It needs something there to commemorate what happened 60 years ago.
Well, I know. I mean, there's one in the Detchmont Forest. Sorry, Neil. There's one in the Detchmont Forest, which Malcolm Robinson commissioned, where Robert Taylor had his encounter with a strange craft on the ground.
Oh, yeah.
Many years ago.
Yeah. So in a second, Andy can jump in, but I'll just ask this question as we've been talking about him. Arthur Shuttlewood, I know who he is, but obviously listeners and viewers may not know who he is. So, Stuart, maybe if you want to sort of give us a background to who Arthur Shuttlewood and why was he on the mural?
Well, yeah, I mean, Arthur basically was, at the time in the early to mid 60s, he was the main journalist for the Warminster Journal. So he was, initially he was quite skeptical, and actually even from the very end he still remained quite skeptical, but then he said, I'm still a believer. But basically he was the one that coordinated all the reports, or most of the reports that came in, and he said he had notebooks after notebooks after notebooks before they even put anything into the print, because we hear about what happened on December the 24th, 1964. We hear about reports. One was in Knock military base. We have Mildred Head and Marjorie Bry. But he had a notebook full of 30 or 40 other instances that happened all around the town, which is quite extraordinary. You don't hear about all these things. And so he was under quite a lot of pressure to thinking, okay, should we start to put something in the actual paper? And then, of course, reports started to come in about May 1965, and then he suddenly thought, yes, this is the first time we've actually had. What actually happened is that he was getting reports of lots of audio phenomena, and that's basically how the Warminster thing kind of started, although Warminster had many other UFO sightings way back, possibly back into the 1930s. But the flap itself, the flap that was celebrated, started obviously at Christmas 1964. But then people started seeing craft in about May, June 65. And so, yes, he said, look, we've got to start putting this in the paper. And I'll be the coordinator, majority of the coordinator for all these reports. And he said he was working 60 hours a week, just going to see people and just sitting down with them and asking what did they see, what did they hear, and he just had a plethora of different phenomena coming in. And that was the strange thing about the thing. It wasn't one particular thing. It was many different experiences people were having, and that's really. I mean, he had a background in the military. He was an ex-policeman as well, so. The way he structured his reports was very professional, I thought. And even when you actually you read his books, they're kind of written in that kind of very analytic kind of way, and so I admire the man, actually. He was a local celebrity. He became quite a famous celebrity, actually, for a brief time. But he actually conducted himself extremely well, I thought, with the press and everything. And yeah, he was a great man, really. I wish I'd known him.
Andy, thank you for that, Stuart. Andy, do you want to ask some questions?
Yeah, I think most people will ask, where can they find an image of the mural? Where can they kind of go for it?
Well, they can find it on my Warminster Thing 60th.co.uk. You can find it there. Where you can actually find the actual, there is an official website of the mural, but maybe it needs one, perhaps. But I could put something together for that. But I think what I've done, I've created a journey of. I've got pictures of the mural being painted, step by step. So at the moment, I would say, yes, you can go to the Warminster Thing 60th.co.uk, and if you click on the journey, you can see all the pictures that right from day one right up to the Saturday when it was opened.
Would they be able to find it on Facebook or Instagram or anything like that?
I can't answer that question, unfortunately.
It might be on Heart of Warminster Facebook.
Heart of Warminster. That's probably on the Heart of Warminster. I was going to think, yeah.
Cool. I was just thinking, actually, potentially commercially, with obviously the artist's permission, some agreement could be drawn up, I'm sure, that you could actually make postcards of it, and sell them either online or through a local Warminster shop or something.
Yeah, I mean, Paul's done, obviously it's his artwork, so he's incorporated onto T-shirts and all sorts. He's got a lot of merchandise, being an artist himself. So, he's got his own shop online. So he's incorporated the mural into some of the artwork that you can buy as well. So I've actually linked that as well if you just click on his name on the page, it will go to his shop and you can actually buy all his merchandise from there.
Cool.
Whenever I think of Warminster, it reminds me of Dad's Army. That's Warmington on Sea, isn't it? It's always the same.
Don't panic.
Don't tell him, Pike.
I really actually endorse what Stuart and Sharon were saying, and I know this is controversial when it comes to skeptics because they make a big song and dance about any location where there's been a UFO event, in any way exploiting that historical phenomenon for its own profit and prosperity. Roswell, for example, Mark Pilkington, in his famous book about UFOs, he dedicates 5 or 6 pages in the book to describing in infuriated, lurid detail the tourist scene at Roswell and things like that. But I don't see there's a problem with that. I mean, if you go to Stratford-on-Avon, there's loads of things to do with William Shakespeare because he was the town's most famous resident, and in fact. There's a massive industry. It really puts that town on the map, really. There's theatres and there's all kinds of souvenir shops. You can get glow-in-the-dark Hamlet skulls and leather-bound copies of Romeo and Juliet and things like that.
Well, let's face it. Who would go to a town for tourism of skeptics? I
think they're jealous.
Do they do mural skeptics on walls?
They're just jealous.
Yeah. I mean, if there's something about UFOs, flying saucers, aliens, or whatever, and it's happening in one town, I think people want to know about it and get to the bottom of it. And if someone wants to make money out of it, it doesn't bother me. I think it's quite.
When you walk down through the town, there's not one shop that has anything to do with the Warminster Thing. Not you don't see any little small trinkets or little figurines or anything or nothing. And it's a shame because I think one of the things I was trying, it was a little bit pie in the sky, really, a little bit. But one of the things I was trying to possibly do was to commandeer one of the shops and actually have a small little museum in there, over the months to lead up to the conference. That if I had done that, maybe that could have turned into something more permanent, possibly. So it does. I think it does need something there in the high street.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that, I mean, you talked about the people that the present day people of Warminster seem to be oblivious because obviously these people, Arthur Shuttlewood, have died, and those people from the 60s, the guy that took the famous UFO photograph, I think he ended up in Australia, didn't he, or something? So there's a lot of people that kind of forgotten about it, or they're a vague kind of genetic memory of it, or something maybe from some of the youngsters that are kicking around today. Do you think they would be opposed to it, or were they opposed to your conference in some way?
I think it was interesting when Paul was painting the mural. I was obviously there taking shots myself, but people were coming up, and there was majority of people were coming up was saying, "Oh, what's all this? Why are you putting why are you repainting over the original thing?" It's like, no, we are actually improving it, don't we? And it's but a lot of older people, interesting enough, people in their sort of, well, I suppose you could say 70s, a few people did come up and say, "Oh yeah, I remember when I was a ranger on Salisbury Plain, and this amazing thing happened, and this grid came down, and there was a lot of soldiers, and suddenly this laser grid came down from nowhere out of the sky, and it lit up all the soldiers, and they kind of knew what was going on." He said they weren't scared. It was all part of this operation they were on. And he was telling us all this, and it was like incredible. And then he said that he was walking down this pathway, and this strange horse started walking towards him on this single pathway, and he said it just came out of nowhere. There was no owner anywhere, or we couldn't see anywhere where it could have possibly come out of a field, and it just moved over to the side to let him pass. And this very early morning mist, it was an extraordinary thing. And so lots of strange things happened around Warminster. It's not just things in the sky, but yeah, I mean, going back to the reaction, I think that a lot of people were pretty much oblivious to what actually happened 60 years ago, because obviously the generations have moved on. And a lot of young people liked the war because it was quite dynamic, but they didn't really know what it was all about and everything. And it was nice to tell them. And then when you told them, they go, "Oh my God, that's amazing! We must find out about this." And you're thinking, there you go. So it does need. Although there was a kind of a museum, a little bit of a museum in the library, but I think it needs more in the town to commemorate something which was extraordinary. I mean, there were parts of around the country that had UFO flaps, but not to this degree of what Warminster had. And I know they talk about Bonnie Bridge, it's the Scotland's Roswell, but it didn't capture like the things that happened around Warminster in the day. And of course, it does suffer from the fact that the technology wasn't there for people to record what happened, and you're just going on what people's experiences were by listening to them and maybe doing drawings of what they saw and everything. Because obviously Gordon Faulkner, who took that image, he literally was taking his camera to his sister's, and then just saw this object flying quite quickly across quite low over the Warminster skies, and just quickly snapped it. And that's all they had in those days, just very simple cameras. So I always said it'd be interesting to see what happens now if there was a massive UFO flap around a concentrated area. Of what would people actually pick up now with all the technology we have?
A friend of mine, she must be, I don't know, late 70s, I would think now. She's a medium, and but she actually used to live in Warminster. And we actually went, when we first got to know her, we actually went up to Warminster and had a meal in her house with her husband. And then she later on moved to the town we live at now in Weymouth in Dorset. And but she told me a very interesting story. She said one day she was taking her kids to school. I don't know what age the kids were. And she saw all these mothers somewhere either near the school or on the high street. It wasn't. I kind of got the impression it was a high street, and they were all looking up at the sky. And she sort of said, "What are you looking at?" And she goes, "Well, look up there." And they looked up, and there was this long, suspended, tubular, cigar-shaped object just hanging in the sky, maybe 500 feet up, something like that, just hanging there. And it was like just silent, not moving. and they were just looking at it for maybe 20 minutes. And she said, I could have stayed there all day and watched it, but I had to get the kids to school, and she decided to take the kids to school. I mean, if it was me, I would have said, sod the kids going to school. I'm hanging around just watching this,
Yeah, me too.
Where was this and when was this, Neil?
So I'm not sure the year, but I would put this somewhere based upon the ages of her kids. And I've met her son, and I would say her son's probably in his mid-50s, probably now. So I would say we're talking maybe about mid-70s. 1970s, something like that, maybe early 70s, being 5-year-olds or something like that, perhaps.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, it was obviously after, I think it was after the initial beginnings of it in the mid-60s, but it seems like it did go on in sporadic amounts afterwards, and tubular cigars were seen in the sky. And so there presumably must be residents of Warminster who maybe remember that. I don't know.
Certainly, if you think about people's ages, and we're talking about like 60 years, but of course there are people a lot older than that, who, I mean, I'm sure still live there and will have first-hand memories of this event. I mean, I don't know if any of them actually turned up at the conference, and maybe Stuart and Sharon, that.
I don't, as far as I know, I don't think they did. But Steve Wills tried to get Gordon Faulkner. He's still alive. But of course, he's in his late 80s now, and it would have been hard for him to have come to the conference, but he did try. But yeah, we were looking at very few people who would have had, actual, they would have seen it firsthand, essentially, back in the 60s.
Those usherettes at the theatre that were showing people to their seats, I mean, they look, with respect to them, they look pretty old. And so I'm wondering, maybe they were witnesses, perhaps way back when. I don't know, but maybe they've forgotten.
It's pretty what Mike Oram could have. I mean, I don't know if. I mean, I never thought to ask him. Mike Oram could have maybe been there. I know he's not well at the moment, so maybe that's why. But he had an experience on Star Hill, and he talks about it in his book. He was actually he went to Warminster a lot in the early 70s and in the time when, because I get the feeling like the thing actually lasted a lot longer than it lasted. From what I gather, it lasted a good 8 years.
It did, yes.
And towards the end of that period, Mike was actually in. He was actually in Warminster. He went up Star Hill and did some sky watches, and he had encounters. He reports an encounter with a strange being, which is reminiscent of the Mothman prophecies.
Yeah.
So, if we just try and narrow down a few things then to kind of analyze what the Warminster thing was in a nutshell, there's reports of people hearing things on their roof initially, wasn't it? Like slates falling off the roof in sort of December 64 or something.
That's right.
And numbers of people, including soldiers, that kind of sort of reported it from their barracks. They heard same sorts of things, weren't there?
That's right. Yes, the Knock barracks, which is more towards Heytesbury, they witnessed, and they were woken up in the early hours of the morning, and they said it just sounded like one of their chimneys was being dismantled physically on the roof and then thrown across the yard, brick by brick, and that was the sound that they described. But of course, when they went out, there was no evidence of anything that actually happened, and that is the case for every single experience that people had. Mildred Head obviously got out very early in the morning, and on Christmas morning she looked up, she couldn't see anything, and the other people that were. There's a very good 89, 90 documentary on the Warminster thing where they've got a lot of archive footage from people, and a lot of these, mostly ladies, strangely enough. I don't know where the men were around this time, but they were explaining what they heard, and it seemed to be a common denominator. There was something being dragged, like a massive branch being dragged across the tiles, and then felt like the tiles were being put back together again once they'd been displaced, and that was what most people described. And then this kind of underlying hum, which was going on with it as well. So, I mean, obviously with Sharon's work as well, we'll go on to some interesting things that came out of that, which was shown in the conference, that this could have been a byproduct of either their technology that they were using or how they came through to our our realm, and it turned into audio phenomena. And I think this is a much wider piece of research, which I think Maria Wheatley touched on as well, which actually was probably one of my favourite talks on the day, to be honest with you.
So the phenomena as you just described it, of the sounds, the things being thrown, and no one witnessed anything, but then they see the kind of end result. It almost strikingly sounds almost like a poltergeist, doesn't it? In the first kind of thing where people in a poltergeist house will hear things being thrown about, but they don't necessarily see the objects flying about. They just see the end result, and they always kind of miss the phenomenon as that happens, but they hear the sounds of it. And that's what a poltergeist kind of definition, generally noisy ghost, comes to be. So it's almost like they get in a noisy ghost on their roof or whatever, but then there are other things later on. You mentioned the hum. Were there sightings of UFOs initially? Were there humanoid sightings? Ben, you mentioned humanoid sightings at one point, didn't you?
Yes, Mike Oram had an encounter with some humanoids on the top of Star Hill, which is one of the three peaks of Warminster. Clay Hill, Star Hill, Cradle Hill. Yeah, he was up there with his girlfriend in a car, and they were going to do some sky watching. And yeah, this strange being turned up. I can't remember the details. It's in his book. But, but things like it reminds me very much actually of the Mothman prophecies.
Yeah.
Or some of the reports from Skinwalker Ranch.
It's very interesting because there really does seem to be, and we've mentioned this many times on various shows, a crossover between the UFO, the alien side, and into the spiritual, ghostly, poltergeist side, and the two seem to go hand in hand. People who see UFOs end up with poltergeist stuff, and people who have poltergeist stuff end up seeing UFOs.
I think you've got to ask yourselves, when something like this happens around certain points, you've got to ask yourselves whether or not there are portals being opened up somehow, and all these things are coming through, not only UFO or UAP phenomenon, but you're also getting the spiritual phenomenon, you're getting the strange creatures coming through. And places like Cannock Chase as well, an awful lot of unidentified creatures and weird phenomenon happening up there. And I think it's all linked, and again, near to military bases, I think it's linked.
And of course, this happened with the skulls experiment. You remember this as well, Ben and Neil. It started off trying to communicate with spirit, and it ended up going in a very strange kind of alien grey direction, didn't it? They started getting these greys turning up on screen.
That's true. Yeah.
It's almost as if like whether they're two separate realms or whether they're combined, I don't know. But imagine, for instance, if they're two separate realms, one will see like a portal light opening, and they'll kind of stick a crowbar in and kind of yank themselves into that reality. So if people are kind of like doing spiritual seances, an alien realm will kind of like stick a crowbar in and say, let's have a piece of the action, and then vice versa. People could be trying to communicate with UFOs and trying to communicate with aliens, and then the spirit realm and kind of like human souls will try and crowbar themselves in and say, hi, we're your relatives, kind of thing. It's weird. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what the correlation is between the two.
Yeah, I mean, Arthur had a very interesting experience with it, because he said on several occasions that he's had very close encounters with very, very tall alien. Well, what he calls them alien, of course, but he said they're around about 7 to 8 foot tall. But he said that they came up to him on a few occasions when he was up on Cradle Hill, and he said that when he saw them, and he literally only was about 10 feet away from them, he said they were translucent a little bit, so you could literally see through them. And then it said they would completely dematerialize and then come literally right next to you. He said it's absolutely frightening. It was terrifying, he said. But he said that that's how they move. They obviously go from, they disappear from our realm and then come back. So whether they're multidimensional, these interdimensional perhaps as well. So I think we're touching on some really interesting stuff here. And it wasn't properly researched back then, because I think they were coordinating so much stuff that they couldn't really do any proper scientific investigations into what was really going on. And I think now we've got so much sophisticated equipment that we could delve into this a little bit more, I think.
I think you start getting into the realms of, when you're talking about other dimensions, you're getting into the realms of cryptids coming through, things like Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster. Are they other dimensional beings? Is this why they can't be caught? Because they're just popping in and out of our reality.
Yeah. I mean, again, the correlation between Bigfoot and people seeing UFOs is beginning to gain momentum. People are beginning to realize that actually where people are seeing Bigfoots are where people are also seeing UFO hotspots.
Yes.
This is a field of study that goes back a long way. I mean, John Keel, Jacques Vallée, they studied this in the early days. And there's even this idea that comes about, which suggests that the whole UFO alien phenomena is simply another aspect of what you might call other dimensional or spiritual phenomena. Even that they're an element of human consciousness in this. And there's something paradoxical here in a way, and which I think this paradox needs to be resolved, actually, because there's no doubt that is true to a certain extent. However, there is contradictory evidence associated with them. For example, this is where Graham Hancock talks about ayahuasca visions and things like this, and how he thinks that's the aliens. But you see, extraterrestrial, the aliens, as we call them, they're not. They have that ethereal element to them, but they also have like a physical element. For example, they've known they can leave footprints, and the vehicles they ride in appear to be made of metal, and they appear to be kind of mechanical. And sometimes they die, and when they die, they leave behind a dead body, just like we do. Spirits don't do that, because spirits are already dead. So that's I think the conundrum that is very much in our faces. And
however, Ben, some spirits can manifest things physically. So poltergeist would be a physical manifestation, but there's also instances of people being touched or held, hugged, or even shaking hands with physical spirits, which
it's all about energy, really, isn't it? It's energy can be made to be material or immaterial.
Sharon, if I can come on to Sharon a little bit more now, because you were doing something called quantum healing hypnosis, an entity release, which you sent me some more information about it, with lots of kind of areas that you touch upon. Now, during the actual conference, I think we were in the afternoon, you'd actually played out a sequence where you're tapping into the higher self, if I understood it, of Stuart in a kind of a trance. So did you want to take us through what kind of got that idea going to try and tap into that, and then how did you think the results came through, and what did you sort of think of them?
I think originally, my work involves putting people under hypnosis to try and get information from their higher selves, usually regarding some kind of healing process, or to get more information about where they should be going in their lives or their life lessons. There are, a lot of things that the higher self can help with. But with Stuart, because Stuart has such a very, very deep connection to his higher self, because I think it's because he's studied transcendental meditation. So when he goes deep, when he gets under hypnosis, he goes very, very deep. And so what I found was I could start asking questions about pretty much anything, about history, about our true reality, or different mysteries around the world, all sorts of things. And Stuart's higher self would just come back with these amazing answers that Stuart had no idea what he was talking about. If he been conscious, he just wouldn't know what he was about. So I just started doing this. So every time I did a hypnosis session with Stuart, I would have a list of questions about things like the Mothman, for example, and all sorts of other things that were mysterious, that were interesting to us, and just ask a list of questions to see what his higher self said. So during the conference, because it was on the Warminster Thing, we asked about what the Warminster Thing was, why it was happening around Warminster itself. Was there any connection to the people of Warminster? whether there was any connection to the fact that there were military bases around the area. And so Stuart's higher self answered all these questions, and it said that the reason for all of the activity from the 60s onwards, if not beforehand, was due to the extraterrestrials wishing to start communications, start almost like the awakening period of humanity, so that humanity would be awakened to the fact that extraterrestrials were out there.
I think you termed it to be mid-60s of your timeline. These events occurred over several months, a collection of sounds and strange sightings at times, and turned into more sky events. Some were termed lights in the sky, and some were seen as more solid, structured craft. Craft, as your term, is the device that is propelled by some intelligent force, which it was.
Right, so it was almost like Warminster was a little nudge on the consciousness of England as such, and presumably it's happened in other hotspots around the world, and it's to get people to sort of look outside themselves and what's going on out there, what is this thing happening, and
exactly.
Yes. And so did it come to a major conclusion of like talking about specific cases, or was it a general overview of it's the aliens and they're here to stay type of thing conclusion?
I think it didn't go into the nitty-gritty specifics. It kept it very general, because I think we were asking very general questions. We weren't asking about any specific cases as such. But I think what was very interesting out of it was the fact that the area itself played a really important role in the whole process. And it did say that there were, there were also important places around the world as well. But it said that there was a concentration of energy in this area that they were attracted to, and this was the whole part of how they coordinated themselves to come into our realm. And it used all these hillsides as part of, like, they were like beacons essentially for them to come in and out of our existence. Hence why you hear of Cradle Hill and Star Hill and Battlesbury Hill Fort, Clay Hill, Cop Heath. All these places were important to them, and that then you start asking other questions about what are these hillsides. Were they natural hillsides or were they something else? And then you go into the realms of hidden history, and perhaps I think it did come up with the fact that some of them were temples and they were physical buildings, a bit like the Bosnian pyramids. I went to the Bosnian pyramids in 2013, and I stood on them and I thought, these things are not natural hillsides. These are definitely artificial. They'd done some excavations already, and they found massive blocks coming out of the hillside, and under about maybe 5 feet of earth, I guess, because obviously there's forests all across. And I'm going off the subject here, but I'm just giving you an idea of perhaps Warminster does have these temples underneath these hillsides. And then you ask the question, well, how far back do we look at this? And I think that's what Maria was talking about, that it goes way back to ancient times, that ancient peoples perhaps saw these beings coming through and this light phenomena, and they place their ancient sites on these areas of importance. So,
and the good thing about using quantum hypnosis to do this is that you can ask anything, and if you've got a good enough subject who has a really good connection with their higher self, you can get answers about pretty much anything. I've had clients who've seen lives in Atlantis, for example, described what's been going on there, all about the fall of Atlantis and why it fell, and all sorts of things from, throughout history. And we have all of the things that go against the narrative of mainstream history, even. So many things, so many rabbit holes to go down.
Talking of going against the narrative, and I asked this of most guests, did you have any circus happen when you were going into transcendental meditation? And when I say circus, I mean black helicopters, unusual phone calls being followed, cars flashing headlights, anything of that nature.
I'd say that was more being involved in crop circles.
Okay.
Anything to do with TM, I think. But yeah, I was followed a few times involved in crop circles, but we kind of knew that anyway, because we knew we were small cheeses, really. And of course, they've got to keep an eye on people. Even when you're up on Cradle Hill, the amount of times the rangers come back and forth in their pickups just to check you out. So they know we're there. They want to keep an eye on you. And but no, nothing in meditation. I mean, that's a very peaceful thing to do.
That's interesting. Yeah, well, I'm glad you had that experience, because generally speaking, what I found is when people put it this way, this planet is kind of like there's a lid on it to keep people dumbed down and stupid. And when people begin to open the lid a little bit and peek up and use their consciousness to find higher truths and stuff, the establishment doesn't really like that, and they send their goons to come and play games.
Not only do they send their goons, they also send demons.
Yes,
so you'll find a lot of people in the spiritual community, especially the healing community, who have a lot of demonic attacks.
Yes.
And that's another thing that I deal with, so I take the demons off.
Yeah, interesting. I actually think that when it comes to global politics, and especially people like Keir Starmer, behind the empty suits, I personally believe are demons. I think Keir Starmer is just an empty vessel. He's a stupid puppet with his stupid smiling face and empty promises. But behind him, I think, is demons, because his policies, that I can't see any other way. His policies are to destroy this country and to destroy the people.
I think they're I think it's all a big wake up. I think it's a great big wake up for the British public, and I think in a way it needed to happen. I don't personally think that the Keir Starmer that you're seeing at the moment is necessarily the original Keir Starmer.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's another rabbit hole. That's another rabbit hole, isn't it?
It's like the Joe Biden puppet, isn't it? Yeah.
But I do think it's there's a big wake up going on, and it's like you're watching a movie at the moment, and it's crazy.
I think they're scared. I think they're, do you know what? People like me, you, and everyone in this group meeting, I think they're scared of people like us, because we can see through the bullshit, and we're saying, actually, there's something a bit bigger than just the 3D world that we're looking at here. There's higher consciousnesses. There is supernatural activity. There is UFOs. There are spirits. There are aliens. There are portals, and there are energies, and we can all use it. And we can actually use it to try and create global peace, which is why I think we're kind of supposed to be here doing that. And
well,
I think
they're trying to suppress human spirituality
exactly
and our own powers.
Exactly that.
Suppressing them for probably thousands of years.
Yeah. What was it George Carlin said? They want you just intelligent enough to operate the machinery, but
keep
not
turning
quite...
the handle. Yeah.
Yeah, pulling the handles, but not quite intelligent enough to work out what the hell is going on.
So, Sharon, we were talking a little bit about the quantum healing that you were doing on Stuart to kind of communicate with his higher self and ask questions about the Warminster Thing. And I was looking through the list of things you cover as kind of topics you cover in your quantum healing. You got something called, strangely enough, Starship Healing. Now, what does that mean?
So Starship Healing was something I sort of stumbled upon. So within quantum healing, there are quite a lot of other modalities that you can combine in quantum healing. So not only things like the removal of entities, not only physical and emotional healing and trauma release, not only past life regression, but because I had my niece is suffering from endometriosis at the moment. So I thought, what can I do in order to try and heal her issues. So I thought, there's plenty of things within quantum healing hypnosis that we touched on. I thought, is there something in a past life, some kind of trauma that she's holding on to? And what can I try and do once we've dealt with those issues? Is there anything that I can do to offer, full-on healing? I thought, I know that there are people within the quantum healing community who do something called starship healing. And I thought, I wonder if I can take my niece's higher self and make her visualize going on to an advanced healing spaceship and get healed on an advanced healing frequency bed. So I know that this technology exists. I'm sure that we're going to get this technology at some point. And
going into the realms of med beds now.
Sorry?
We're going into the realms of med beds.
We are.
Yeah.
We are. So I thought, how can I get her this a feeling of visualizing this technology so that maybe her subconscious takes over and it starts healing her body. And I thought, well, I'll get her to visualize going up onto a spaceship and onto one of these healing beds and see what happens. So what I did was, during a hypnosis session with her, I asked her to visualize a ship coming towards her and her being beamed up. And I said, on this the ship, you're going to meet a being who welcomes you. And then I want you to tell me what happens. So I asked her then to describe the being. So she starts describing this tall, sort of purple-skinned being that she met. And instead of me having to actually talk her through onto a bed, which is what I was expecting to do, talk her through onto a bed and say, this is what's going to happen, she actually took over. She told me what was happening. So she said, this being's leading me to another corner of the ship and into a liquid-filled pod. She said, and it's got all these cables and wires coming through with all of these different coloured lights coming through. She said, they're lowering me into this pod. And all of these sort of coloured lights are now going through. And I said, how long is this going to take? And she said, about 30 minutes. And I said, can we speed up the process? And she said, yes. And so then she told me she was now getting out of the pod. And I said to her, what happens next? She said, the being's going to lead me out and take me back down out of the ship. And I brought her higher self forward at this point, and I said, has this now healed this problem? And the higher self said, yes. And when I asked the higher self, was she actually there? It said, yes, she was. So somewhere on an energetic or astral level, it said she was actually on a ship. Now, she's going through a lot of scans at the moment. So we're trying to work out whether or not what we did has had an effect. I believe it has, because straight after the session, she said she felt something had lifted. She felt that the pain had certainly gone that she was experiencing. She said, yeah, I feel that something's lifted. So I'm hoping that with continued sessions of this, we can get this problem sorted out. And you do experience quite a lot of instantaneous healing with quantum healing hypnosis, and I've experienced it myself.
Interesting. I mean, I was kind of thinking Starship Healing. What's that? And I was sort of picturing Mr. Scott of the Starship Enterprise, somehow trying to repair the Enterprise because it's broken or something. But obviously, it was clearly nothing to do with that. But could that be like it's a method to a means to an end? Like, for instance, you could take them back into a past life and say, oh, the reason you got endometriosis is because you had XYZ condition or you was whatever in a past life. And then you do some sort of healing process in the past life and it can have the same result.
Yes, if someone's suffering from some condition because of something that they've done in a past life or some way that they've died in a past life, which is fairly usual, then once they've understood that, once their higher self or their subconscious or whatever it is within them that has this understanding or carries this thing through, once it's understood, you can ask the higher self, now this has been understood, can we now release it? And the higher self will usually say, yes, we can release it. And that's something that I've actually experienced myself. So my very first quantum healing hypnosis session, before I decided to train in this, I'd been suffering from the result of cancer treatment. I had daily abdominal pains and digestive issues, and I'd become allergic to all sorts of different foods. And when I asked during the session of my higher self, it was asked why I'd been suffering with all of these digestive issues. It turns out that in a past life, I'd actually stabbed myself in the stomach. Once I'd understood that, and the practitioner asked, can we now release that? And my higher self said, yes. Immediately after that session, the abdominal pains disappeared completely, and all of the food allergies disappeared completely.
Wow.
So it's quite amazing what can be done. I actually had another client who was suffering with facial eczema, which she'd been suffering with for about 6 months. And once we did a regression on her, she said that she'd been remembering things from her current life. We did a regression with her, and it turns out that she'd been hiding something from herself. So she'd suffered something in her early life, which I'm not going to talk about. But once she'd understood it, once she'd remembered it, the person who this involved had actually died, and this person actually came through during the session to apologize to her for what they'd done to her. Once she'd understood it, the condition disappeared straight away. So within 2 days, her face had completely cleared up, because she'd understood what had happened. And she knew that actually the reason that the eczema had appeared was because she was putting on a mask to the world.
Right.
The human body is, the physical body is very literal. So it will give you certain conditions depending on your emotional state.
Yeah.
So, for example, we found out that my niece's endometriosis, which is a problem within the reproductive system, is due to her having a fear of childbirth.
Right.
And so there's a whole book which I can recommend. So if anyone's interested, there's a book here that I've got next to me called Metaphysical Anatomy, which describes all of the conditions. It's a huge book, and it describes all of the emotions and traumas behind every physical condition and every disease.
It's reminiscent to me, just looking at the book, of Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. I think she had something similar in that book. But then Louise Hay then got that information from Jane. I know I talk about Jane Roberts and Seth all the time on this show, but it always goes back to that. Jane Roberts and Seth. Are you familiar at all with those people? No.
I'm not, I'm afraid. No,
Okay.
I have heard of Louise Hay.
I got John involved with the Seth material, John Williams, our mutual friend, John Williams. So Jane Roberts was this kind of American channeler from the 60s and 70s. She died in 1984. But she channeled this higher self entity, or whatever you want to call it, spirit guide called Seth. And he wrote about 7 or 8 books through. I can't remember exactly how many, but he would talk about, you form your reality, or you create your own reality, and all the conditions within your body you create yourself. And when you sort of look at some people suffering on all these kind of things, the things they get, you think, oh my God, who would want to create that? But maybe it's true. Maybe people have subconsciously or higher self created it or something for whatever reason. But he actually talks about hypnosis in one of the books, about how hypnotism can work, even though it might work temporarily or it might work permanently. Depends if you eradicate the beliefs that have caused the condition. This is what he was saying. It's a real mind meld of like, it's quite heavy sort of stuff, but it's one of the things that I would recommend checking out if you can. Now, getting back to the UFO crop circle thing, Stuart. So you got into this whole thing via crop circles. Was that because you'd had an early experience of crop circles as a youngster, or you'd seen a UFO or anything like that? Or
yeah, I mean, I right from childhood, I had an interest in UFOs, and I was into ancient Egypt and all sorts of mysteries. I got top marks in school on it and everything. So clearly the teachers knew I had something. There was something about me which was, a little bit more mysterious, perhaps. But yeah, I mean, I got into crop circles in 1990, which was the major year for them when they exploded on the scene, because previous to that they were just single sets of circles, maybe quintuplet sets. That's how much complicated they got. And then 1990 came on the scene, although we still had the similar very simple circles, but also we had the massive pictograms that were appearing all around the areas like Warminster and Avebury, and around the area of Salisbury Plain and everything. So there was over 1,000 events actually in 1990, and we can go into the whole hoaxing thing, the aspects of all that, which I know a lot about, but still today nobody can tell me that they were all man-made, and we were just looking at just a man-made phenomena. We were looking at something far greater than that, and we are intrinsically connected to the crop circles. And I think even if Arthur Shuttlewood was still alive today, he probably would say the same thing, because he saw very unusual markings below Clay Hill in the early 70s. So crop circles came on the scene around Warminster as well. Those were very early crop circles, of course. But I think my interest in crop circles, what happens around crop circles is a lot of ufology goes on, because people do see and have seen strange craft appearing around crop circles, but also amorphous lights, and which are more common actually than the actual structure craft. So I've always had that interest there in ufology, and although I've taken a back step from crop circles, because I think for me they've served their purpose for me. I think I've reached a point where I can move on to something else, although I still follow them. But I think we only had about 8 this year, which the bottom's fallen out of them technically. But
do you think that's because the aliens or the entities or the consciousness behind it have kind of like shifted onto other things, or they think it's time for the next step?
Possibly, but I think it goes back to what we said about the times of the 60s, when there was a consciousness shift. And I think it was happening around the late 80s, early 90s. There was another conscious shift. The Berlin Wall fell down in 89, and there were a lot of massive political things going on around the world. And I think it was a raising of consciousness. And there was a book called Rising Out of Chaos, and by Simon Peter Fuller, and he wrote about the Jerusalem cross taken from Jerusalem literally all the way over to Glastonbury Tor, and stuck the actual staff on top of the Tor in around about March, April 1990. And then suddenly we had this explosion of crop circles across the world. Yes, they were across the world, not just in this country. So I think it was to do with the Christ consciousness coming back. It had definitely had that feeling. And I think that although we talk about UFOs and UAPs, we want to call them now, but I think that they were interdimensional beings, I think more so than actual aliens. That's my feeling on it personally, but because of the personal experience I've had in crop circles over the years, made me feel that they were very much connected to the earth than actually something external outside of our, this realm, planet, whichever you want to call it. So it goes back to what you said, Andy. I think that there's been a shift in consciousness, and perhaps we are in this darker period, I feel, but I think we will move out into a period of light, and I think we're in the beginnings of that happening, because we're starting to see structures falling, governments falling, and the political landscape will change through the changing consciousness. So perhaps the crop circle phenomenon will appear, again someday because of that.
I'll just say, as you're talking there, Stuart, when you started talking about the crop circles and whatnot, I saw something fall in front of you on the screen, and it showed up quite clearly to me, at least, against your black jumper. And
So, it goes back to what we
I wouldn't
said
say it was an
about,
orb, but you kind of think, well, what was it? It almost looked like a feather
consciousness, possibly, but
shaped rather than a spherical thing, and it just
it goes
passed in front of your jumper and showed up. So I don't know if there's something physically on the floor or on your lap or anything. I don't know.
Not that I can see.
No, but I'll certainly try and do some screen grabs or clips of it.
Very interesting to
send it to you. Yeah, yeah.
That'd be interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So
I think when you're talking sometimes about spiritual subjects, this is happening.
Yeah, you get weird little signs.
Many times before on people talking on interviews, and there's an orb that goes past them in the room, and Mark Devlin had it actually once. He had a whole load of orbs. I don't know if you know Mark Devlin, but he's a true seeker kind of guy. But he had all these orbs going around his ceiling as he was talking. I don't know if anybody picked it up on that particular interview, but I definitely saw them, and he was talking about something really quite profound about, because he does talk about how we should stand up for ourselves and stand against all this evil in the world.
And Andy, go on, Ben. Go on.
Mark's the kind of person who's got so much energy he would attract those sorts of things. I wanted to ask actually, Sharon, and primarily, but anyone else who wants to answer, is the higher self the same phenomenon as what Anthony Peake calls the daemon? I don't know if you know much about it. He says the personality split into he calls it the eidolon, which is your conscious mind, and the daemon, which is described. It sounds very much like a description of the higher self.
I would say that the higher self is like it's Dolores Cannon calls it the oversoul.
I was going to ask you. There's no time. I was going to ask you about Dolores. But carry on.
So she describes it as the oversoul, and it's not like I would say it's not like a singular entity. I would say it's almost like a collective entity, if you like, and it's able to connect to the higher realms and collect information from, say, like the Akashic records. How you would totally describe it as, I mean, there are a lot of aspects of us, physical bodies, our energetic bodies, our light bodies, our astral bodies. Whether you can say, what part of the oversoul actually is, I couldn't say. I just know that it's like our connection to our soul.
Oh, right. Since that sounds really a bit like what Anthony Peake talks about, and he mentions, for example, like split brain patients who seem to like their personality splits, and there's several people like Ian McGilchrist who theorizes that you're actually talking to another aspect of yourself as if it's another person.
Yeah,
we've run out of time, unfortunately, but I can't go into detail. But it's interesting stuff. Thanks.
Yeah,
Neil, you're going to ask something.
Yeah, I was going to mention, as we were talking about orbs, I remember on your talk that you did for the Essex UFO group, Andy, and they filmed orbs floating around whilst you were doing your talk on the stage there, didn't they?
Yeah. And the interesting thing is obviously skeptics would say, it's just dust flying about. However, when people came into the room, they would have shifted the air right at the beginning of the talk, so there would have been dust there, and yet it didn't show on camera for the first part of the talk. And then the second part of the talk, I really got into kind of like the circus, because I've had circus in my life, and then I started going into kind of like consciousness and high dimensions, and that's when all these orbs started flying around.
I was always dubious of orbs, thinking, it's just sort of dust, like people would say, picked up on these super sensitive digital cameras and whatnot. And in the olden days, we never picked them up on our old film cameras. But then my brother had filmed something where this orb had come down, and then it literally appeared to be falling down, and then just shot sideways through a wall. Never seen anything like it. Amazing stuff.
I can hand on heart honestly say that I've seen orbs with the naked eye, actual lit up orbs. So they exist. 100% they exist. I've seen, they're like the best way I could describe them is when you've got welders and you've got sparks flying from people welding. It's one of those, and they kind of zip. They go like that.
Yeah.
And I've seen them. I've seen them several times.
Wow. Okay. Well done. Thank you, everyone, for joining us once more on the Paranormal Peep Show. So if we can come to Sharon and Stuart for the closure, do you have any more plans to put any more conferences or any events together at all? Yeah, a nice holiday somewhere.
Yeah, I need a holiday.
I think I think personally, I think we should be concentrating on some other stuff apart from UFO phenomenon. I'd quite like to put a conference together regarding our hidden history. I think that's one of the big the big topics that will certainly be of interest to a lot of people who are, you know, going against the historical narrative now, who want to find out more about, you know,
suppressed history type of thing. Yeah.
Are we going into Tartaria with this, or other
Tartaria, mud floods, petrified giants, all sorts of things.
Sounds like we'll be there then. Yeah, cool. So if they want to find out about the Warminster Thing, you have a website, don't you, Stuart?
Yeah, so it's Warminster Thing 60th.co.uk. I will be updating it with the full film. We've still got it at the moment, but they can also see some updates. They can see images of the day as well and everything, and like you say, the mural from the beginning to the end. And so I will turn what was originally the conference site into something else. So it will evolve essentially. Yeah.
Okay. And Sharon, you got your website of sharonmason.co.uk.
That's it.
So yeah, we'll pop that on the screen. So it's sharonmason.co.uk. So that's to find out more about quantum healing, hypnosis, and entity release. And also, if you've got trouble with the old Starship, I'm sure Sharon can sort you out there as well. All right. Thank you very much indeed for joining us both on the Paranormal Peep Show. Good luck with all your future projects and endeavours, and the Hidden History Conference. I'm sure there'll be a lot of interest in that. It sounds really great already, just by the title alone. So it's good night from us, Ben and Andy. Any final words?
Yeah, got tons of events coming up. Go to Tune In Events on Instagram and Facebook to see what's going on.
Okay, cool. And Ben, do you have anything coming up, or gone past, or publications?
I'm always speaking at various events, and I've got my website, Hapanwo, HPANWO, Hospital Porters Against the New World Order. And please read my book, Roswell writing a novel of disclosure, and its sequels, available at all good bookshops now, priced £10. So I hope you enjoy that. If you enjoy the Paranormal Peep Show, I think you'll like this book. It's very, very similar in terms of themes.
Cool. Okay, so that leaves me just to say thank you very much for one and all listening to our programme this evening on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. This is Neil Ward on the Paranormal Peep Show, signing out. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.